A new study shows chops and ground pork may be full of bad bacteria.
A whole host of foodborne illnesses is caused by these bacteria. We're talking about stomach aches, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, even in the most extreme cases, death. But Consumer Reports says bacteria are not the only thing pork eaters should be worried about.
Imagine this. Millions of wild boars, massive, aggressive, unstoppable, are tearing across America right now. They're devouring crops, destroying farmland.
Now, state and federal groups meeting to deal with a growing problem in our state. Experts are finding feral swine in every county in Oklahoma, and they are destroying farmland.
And multiplying faster than any other invasive animal in the country. We're talking about an endless supply of free meat, high-quality protein, millions of pounds available for the taking. Yet despite this massive abundance, almost no American puts wild boar on their dinner table. Why? Why does a nation obsessed with bacon, pork chops, and barbecue completely ignore an animal that seems like an unlimited food source? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about taste. It's not just about hunting regulations. It's not even primarily about availability. The real reason Americans won't eat wild boar is far stranger, far more disturbing, and far more complex than you could possibly imagine. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about food, safety, and one of the most destructive invasions happening right under our noses. Stay with me, because this story gets dark, fascinating, and absolutely wild. The invasion. Nobody talks about. Let me paint you a picture of what's really happening across America right now. Wild pigs roam freely across the United States. Not dozens, not thousands. We're talking about millions of these animals spreading like a plague across nearly every state in the nation. And here's what makes this even more bizarre. These animals are abundant, often fat, and can provide high-quality meat. They're essentially a free buffet wandering through America's countryside. Yet the vast majority of Americans won't touch them. Why would that be? What could possibly make an entire nation turn away from such an abundant food source? The story begins nearly a century ago, back in the 1930s, when Russian boars were deliberately introduced to America. At the time, this seemed brilliant. These pigs were brought in for fat, meat, and breeding purposes. Entrepreneurs thought they'd found the next big agricultural opportunity. Some were kept on farms, but many, too many, escaped into the wild. And once free, they adapted to the American landscape with terrifying success. Today, feral pigs are found in almost every state, but they're particularly concentrated in Texas and California. Their populations have exploded beyond anyone's worst predictions. Despite this massive availability, Americans rarely hunt them for food. And when they do hunt them, it's almost never about putting meat on the table. Because here's the thing, the problem with wild pigs isn't just that they exist, it's what they do. These animals are now considered one of the most destructive invasive species in the entire country.
It's estimated about 6 million feral pigs are roaming America, causing an estimated $1.5 billion in damages. Just this week, a group of senators introduced legislation aimed at eradicating the destructive animals.
They tear through forests, fields, and farmlands with devastating efficiency. Their rooting behavior, where they dig up soil searching for food, destroys crops, damages irrigation systems, and leaves land completely unsuitable for farming. Feral pigs eat everything, and I mean everything. Crops, small wildlife, bird eggs, reptiles, carrion. They upset the delicate balance of entire ecosystems wherever they go. The economic cost? It's staggering. Every single year, farmers, ranchers, and landowners across the United States face losses totaling roughly $2.5 billion. That's billion with a B. This includes destroyed crops, damaged pastures, soil erosion, contaminated water sources, and the constant cost of repairing fences and other property destroyed by these aggressive animals. In areas where pig populations are most concentrated, entire landscapes are permanently altered. Some farmland may never fully recover. And here's what makes this crisis truly terrifying. Their reproductive ability is almost supernatural. Female pigs can produce up to 2 litters per year, with each litter containing anywhere from 4 to 12 piglets. Think about that math for a moment. This explosive population growth ensures that even the most aggressive culling efforts rarely keep numbers in check. You might think you have the problem under control one year, only to find the population has doubled the next. So here's the paradox that should be keeping agricultural experts awake at night. America is drowning in feral pigs. They could provide an abundant, sustainable source of meat that might actually help control their devastating population. They're already here. They're already causing billions in damage. Yet they're mostly ignored, seen as pests rather than food, viewed as a problem without a solution. But why? What's stopping us from turning this ecological disaster into a food opportunity? The challenge is balancing safety, regulation, and practicality. And in states like Texas, the situation has become so desperate that drastic measures have become the only option. What's happening in Texas right now is nothing short of a war, a pig war. Texas's pig war. Texas is ground zero for America's battle against feral hogs. And when I say battle, I'm not exaggerating. The state now faces a staggering population estimated at somewhere between 2.6 million to 3 million feral hogs. These animals occupy nearly every county and thrive on approximately 79% of Texas's land. Let that sink in. Nearly 4/5 of an entire state, one of America's largest states, is now wild boar territory. They're almost impossible to contain.
Yearly, the USDA reports wild hogs cause around $2.5 billion in damages, decimating farmland and spreading diseases along the way.
And what some experts are now calling isn't just a problem. It's a full-scale pig war, with state agencies, researchers, and desperate landowners all scrambling to stop the damage. But why does Texas have it so bad? Why do feral hogs thrive here better than almost anywhere else? The answer lies in the environment itself. Mild winters mean piglets survive year-round. Long growing seasons provide constant food. Abundant water sources keep them hydrated. And the variety of habitats, forests, grasslands, even suburban areas, gives them endless places to hide, breed, and feed. These animals are highly adaptable and shockingly intelligent. They can find food and shelter in almost any environment. They learn to avoid traps. They become nocturnal when hunters are active during the day. And that reproduction rate I mentioned earlier, it's even more devastating in Texas's perfect conditions. A single female produces 2 litters per year, with 4 to 12 piglets each time. Combined with virtually no natural predators, this ensures rapid population recovery even after aggressive culling. You could remove thousands of pigs one month, and by the next year, the population rebounds as if nothing happened. The economic impact in Texas alone is crushing. Annual agricultural losses are estimated at $52 million just in this one state. That includes destroyed crops, trampled pastures, damaged fences, contaminated livestock feed, and ruined equipment. Nationwide, the damages and control costs rise to over $1.5 billion every single year. But it's not just about money. These pigs cause catastrophic ecological damage. Their rooting behavior erodes topsoil, turning productive farmland into scarred wasteland. They damage waterways and streams, causing pollution and flooding. They destroy native plant habitats and prey on ground-nesting birds, small mammals, and reptiles. Native species that have lived in Texas for thousands of years are now threatened because of an animal that's only been here for decades. In 2023, researchers used drones to monitor cornfields in Texas. What they found was horrifying. Feral pigs destroyed or damaged up to 9.2% of crops in some fields. That led to yield losses of over 3,400 kilograms per hectare, and financial losses ranging from $17 to $48 per hectare. For farmers already operating on thin margins, this kind of loss can mean the difference between staying in business and going bankrupt. Controlling the population has proven extraordinarily difficult, some would say impossible. Traditional hunting is allowed year-round on private land with no bag limits. Sounds like a solution, right? Wrong. Hunters deploy traps, snares, trained dogs, and every weapon imaginable. But feral hogs are intelligent and wary. They learn quickly. They adapt to hunting pressures faster than we can develop new strategies. They become nocturnal. They avoid traps. They recognize danger and change their behavior within days. Given these impossible challenges, Texas has turned to more extreme measures. Aerial control, often called aerial gunning.
The war on feral hogs in New Mexico just got more intense. The hogs destroy land, crops, and even attack other animals. Now, the Ruidoso News says the state is rolling out a new plan in the Capitan Wilderness that involves shooting the hogs from helicopters.
Uses helicopters or fixed-wing aircraft to reach remote or heavily infested areas. Wildlife. Managers shoot large numbers of hogs from the air in terrains where ground-based control simply doesn't work. It's expensive, it's controversial, but it's one of the few methods that can remove significant numbers quickly. But even this isn't enough. Studies indicate that to simply stabilize wild hog populations, not eliminate them, just stop them from growing, you would need to remove 66 to 70% of all feral hogs each year. Current efforts? They remove only around 29%. That means despite all the hunting, all the traps, all the aerial gunning, all the millions of dollars spent, the population is still rising. State agencies are trying to get smarter about this. The Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute created something called the Wild Pig Reporting Tool, a system that collects real-time data from landowners and residents. This tool maps sightings, tracks damage, and guides control efforts. It's one of the few systematic approaches to managing hog populations statewide. But even with better technology and coordination, the problem is far from solved. Hogs continue to devastate crops. They trample pastures. They pollute water sources. They compete with and prey on native wildlife. Their intelligence, adaptability, and sheer numbers make them one of the most destructive invasive animals in North America. But beyond all this visible destruction, the torn-up fields, the damaged ecosystems, the billions in economic losses, feral hogs carry something even more dangerous. Something you can't see. Something hiding inside them. And this invisible threat is the main reason they remain off the dinner plate. The true danger is coming next. The hidden health nightmare. Now we get to the real reason Americans don't eat wild boar. And trust me, once you understand this, you'll see why millions of pounds of potential meat go unused every year. Wild pigs aren't just destructive, they're walking disease factories. These animals are opportunistic omnivores. They eat absolutely anything they encounter. Crops, small animals, rotting carrion, even human garbage pulled from dumpsters. This scavenging behavior makes them incredibly likely carriers of dangerous pathogens and parasites that can be transmitted directly to humans. Unlike domesticated pigs raised in controlled, monitored, sanitized environments, feral hogs are completely unregulated. They wallow in mud contaminated with who knows what. They eat diseased animals. They root through waste. There is absolutely no way to ensure the meat is disease-free before it reaches your table. Here's where it gets truly terrifying. Scientific research shows that wild pigs can carry up to 24 different diseases that affect humans. Let me repeat that. 24 zoonotic diseases that can jump from pig to person. Among the most dangerous, brucellosis causes fever, crushing fatigue, and severe joint pain that can last for months. Trichinellosis, a parasitic infection caused by roundworms that leads to agonizing muscle pain, high fever, and in severe cases, heart and breathing complications. Swine influenza viruses, capable of triggering flu outbreaks in nearby human populations, potentially mutating into more dangerous strains. And here's what most people don't realize. You don't even need to eat the meat to get infected. Simply handling the carcass during hunting or field dressing can be enough to contract these diseases if you're not using proper protective equipment. A 2024 review published in Wildlife Society Bulletin didn't mince words. It called wild pigs triple threat pests, combining massive ecological damage with catastrophically high risks of zoonotic disease transmission. But wait, it gets worse. Studies indicate that wild boar meat can carry bacterial infections like Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, all capable of causing serious, potentially life-threatening foodborne illness. Unlike commercially farmed pork, which undergoes strict USDA inspection and monitoring at every stage from farm to table, wild pig meat has absolutely no regulated safety oversight. Hunters and processors cannot guarantee the absence of pathogens, even when the meat looks clean, smells fine, or appears fresh. For people unfamiliar with proper handling techniques, which is most Americans, this creates real, serious danger. You might think, well, just cook it thoroughly. Heat kills bacteria, right? Yes, but thorough cooking reduces risk. It doesn't eliminate the potential for contamination during handling, field dressing, or storage. Touch contaminated meat, then touch your face, you're exposed. Cut yourself while field dressing and the knife touches infected tissue, you're exposed. Store the meat improperly and cross-contaminate other foods, your entire family is exposed. Wildlife disease experts have also noted deeply concerning possibilities that wild pigs could serve as reservoirs for prion-related diseases like chronic wasting disease by interacting with infected deer or elk populations.
Chronic wasting disease is a fatal contagious neurological disease that affects deer, elk, and moose. This past January, Crow Wing County found its first case of chronic wasting disease in the deer population.
Prion diseases are among the most terrifying conditions in biology. Incurable, always fatal, and caused by misfolded proteins that are nearly impossible to destroy even with extreme heat. Then there are the parasites. Oh, the parasites. Feral pigs commonly carry tapeworms, roundworms, and numerous other parasitic organisms. If ingested through undercooked or mishandled meat, these parasites can cause digestive agony, severe muscle inflammation, systemic infections that spread throughout your body, and even long-term health complications. Because wild pigs consume such a wildly varied diet, including decaying animals and contaminated waste, the likelihood of parasite infestation is significantly higher than in farm-raised pork. A 2021 study in Iran identified 8 genera of protozoa and numerous helminths in wild boar populations. Research in Mexico found similar results. Wild pigs carrying parasites capable of infecting both humans and domestic animals. This isn't a regional problem. It's global. Medical and veterinary experts strongly caution against consuming wild pig meat unless it's handled and cooked under strictly controlled conditions. Dr. Susan Schreiner, a wildlife veterinarian with Texas A&M University, put it bluntly. The pathogens carried by wild pigs are unpredictable. Even healthy-looking animals may harbor parasites or bacteria that cause severe disease in humans. Epidemiologists emphasize that the most common routes for disease transmission are field dressing without gloves, inhaling dust from internal organs, eating undercooked meat, and contact with infected blood or tissue. This isn't theoretical. It happens. In California, a trichinosis outbreak in humans was traced directly back to meat from a privately raised boar, not even a fully wild animal. Surveys of hunters in Texas and surrounding states reveal that many have reported minor infections or gastrointestinal illness after improper handling of wild pig carcasses. So here's what you're probably wondering. If the disease risk is this well known and this severe, why doesn't regulation step in? Why doesn't the government make wild boar meat safer and more accessible? Great question. And the answer reveals an entirely different layer of this bizarre story. The regulatory maze. Here's where the story gets even more complicated, and frankly, absurd. The United States has strict regulatory and commercial limitations that make legal sales of wild boars nearly impossible, even if someone wanted to sell the meat. In most states, wild pigs aren't classified as livestock or even typical game animals. Instead, they're labeled as invasive or pest species. That designation might sound like bureaucratic nonsense, but it has massive legal consequences. It heavily restricts how these animals can be handled, processed, and sold. Here's the catch that makes everything nearly impossible. Animals killed in the field by hunters cannot legally enter the commercial supply chain because USDA inspections must occur before death. Read that again. The inspection must happen while the animal is still alive. This ante-mortem requirement is designed to prevent contaminated or diseased meat from entering the market. Makes sense for farm animals. But for wild animals shot in forests or fields, it's a logistical nightmare. This regulation alone severely limits the number of animals that can ever be legally processed for sale. The scarcity of inspected slaughter facilities makes the problem exponentially worse. Between 2017 and 2019, only 17 facilities across just 7 states were certified to process feral swine. Think about that. 17 facilities for an animal population in the millions, spread across the entire United States. Over that 3-year period, these establishments processed a total of 242,198 feral pigs. Sounds like a lot, right? It's a minuscule fraction compared to the millions living in the wild. It's basically a rounding error. And here's the kicker. Nearly all that processing, about 99%, occurred in just 6 facilities in a single state, Texas. This geographic concentration proves that even when legal infrastructure theoretically exists, it's extremely limited and cannot possibly serve the national wild pig population. The combination of strict legal definitions, impossible inspection requirements, and limited facilities creates what experts call a perfect storm, a system that essentially guarantees wild hog meat will never enter mainstream American markets. Even states with massive wild pig populations like California, Florida, and Georgia lack sufficient infrastructure to process animals safely for human consumption. So what happens to all those pigs that hunters kill for population control? In most cases, the meat goes completely unused. It's left in the field to rot or disposed of as waste, despite being perfectly safe if handled and cooked properly. Thousands of pounds of edible protein wasted every single day because of regulatory bottlenecks. This regulatory maze also affects restaurants and specialty meat markets. Chefs interested in sourcing wild boar meat face enormous hurdles, legally transporting animals, finding inspected facilities willing to process them, dealing with inconsistent supply, navigating state-by-state regulations. Even where facilities exist, capacity is severely limited, and demand is usually local. Unlike cattle, poultry, or farm-raised hogs, which operate under standardized USDA inspection and can be mass-produced and marketed at national scale, feral pigs cannot be commercialized in any meaningful way. The result? Millions of pounds of potential meat remain unused every year because of legal and structural barriers that were never designed for invasive species management. But you know what? Regulatory limitations are only one piece of this puzzle. There's another barrier, one that might be even more powerful than laws or logistics. We need to talk about perception, and it gets weird. The gross factor. Even if we solved every regulatory problem tomorrow, if we built processing facilities in every state and streamlined inspection requirements, there's still one massive barrier that would keep wild boar off American plates. That barrier exists entirely in our heads. Across many regions of the United States, people view feral pigs as wild, dirty, and invasive. This cultural perception heavily influences attitudes toward wild pig meat, discouraging most Americans from even considering it as food. Even though wild boar meat can be flavorful and in some cases superior to domestic pork, the stigma around these animals persists and grows stronger. Here's what makes this fascinating. Studies from other parts of the world consistently show that wild boar meat is highly palatable and can even be preferred over farmed pork in blind sensory evaluations. But in America, the mental block is so strong that taste doesn't even matter. A comprehensive literature review examining consumer attitudes toward hunted wild game meat found that food safety concerns are among the main obstacles to acceptance. Even consumers interested in trying new, adventurous foods hesitate because of perceived health risks. The review highlighted that knowledge about proper handling and cooking of wild game is severely limited among the general population, reinforcing deep reluctance. Multiple studies show participants cited wild game as something foreign or even untrustworthy. Negative associations are incredibly common. Game, wild, dirty, risky. This mental equation dominates American consciousness, even among people willing to explore unusual culinary experiences like insects, exotic fish, or organ meats. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sensory studies comparing wild boar meat to domestic pork offer a stark contrast to cultural attitudes. In one study published by MDPI, wild boar meat from female hogs scored high in overall liking for taste, tenderness, and flavor. The meat performed well in blind taste tests. People genuinely enjoyed it. But when those same participants learned they'd been eating wild boar, many expressed disgust or discomfort, despite having just said they liked the taste. Public perception surveys reinforced this disconnect. A 2024 survey in Alabama, a state with significant wild pig problems.
A brand new survey is now active, asking what Alabamians feel are the top priorities for their particular area. State leaders are looking for your input on topics like agriculture, youth development, community health, and more.
Revealed that the vast majority of respondents considered wild pigs dangerous or harmful rather than a viable meat source. People expressed concern about property damage, environmental harm, and disease. Very few recognized the possibility of using feral pigs as a food resource, even when specifically asked. Cultural stigma, lack of familiarity, and perceived health risks combine to create overwhelming reluctance. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but if people actually tried properly prepared wild boar, wouldn't they change their minds? That's a fair question. And it leads us to another problem entirely. One that exists even when people are willing to give it a shot. The meat itself can be problematic. The meat quality lottery. All right, let's say you've gotten past the disease concerns, the regulatory nightmares, and the cultural stigma. You're actually willing to try wild boar meat. Congratulations. Now you face an entirely different problem. The meat itself is wildly unpredictable. While wild hogs are abundant, their meat is inherently variable in ways that make it nearly impossible to match the uniformity and predictability Americans expect from domestic pork. Every single wild boar is different, and those differences show up dramatically when you try to eat them. In specialized farms and processing operations where wild boar is actually produced commercially, processors avoid older male hogs like the plague. Why? Because their meat develops an unpleasant barnyard taint caused by hormones and varied diet. This odor has been described as sweaty, musky, or, and I'm quoting actual consumer studies here, manure-like. It's widely disliked by consumers and can render meat completely unsuitable for sale or consumption, no matter how it's prepared. A controlled study found that wild boars generally have lower carcass weights than domestic pigs, higher ultimate pH levels, different meat color, and varying fat distribution. These differences affect not just appearance, but also tenderness, cooking behavior, and shelf life. From a nutritional standpoint, wild boar meat does show some advantages. In one study, female boar meat achieved a mean sensory score of approximately 5.9 out of 10. Compared to only 3.9 for domestic pork. However, these favorable results absolutely do not extend uniformly across all wild boars. Meat from male hogs or older animals exhibits massive variability. Depending on diet, activity level, living conditions, and age, meat can vary dramatically in texture, from tender to tough as leather, aroma, from pleasant to nauseating, color, from pink to dark red or purple, and aftertaste, from mild to overpowering. The Environmental Literacy Council highlights that wild hogs feeding on diverse, unpredictable diets will develop major differences in fat distribution, muscle composition, and flavor, making consistency impossible. One particularly challenging factor is what's scientifically known as boar taint, a distinct odor and flavor present in uncastrated males. It's caused by compounds called androstenone and scatol. These compounds accumulate in fat tissue and create flavors described as sweaty, urine-like, fecal, and chemically bitter. Because these compounds are biologically produced and vary with age and hormonal status, meat from male wild hogs often cannot meet consumer taste expectations without special processing that's not available in field conditions. Beyond biological factors, unusual environmental contamination adds another layer of concern. In parts of Germany and Japan, wild boar meat has shown elevated levels of radioactivity. Why? Because the boars consume truffles and mushrooms that absorb residual radioactive particles from Cold War-era nuclear testing. These particles then concentrate in the animal's tissues. While geographically limited, cases like these feed into the broader perception that wild boar meat is unpredictable and potentially unsafe. In the United States, bizarre incidents reinforce public wariness. In 2015, hunters in California discovered a wild hog with strikingly blue fat, bright, unnatural blue coloring throughout its body fat. The discovery sparked immediate fears of industrial chemical contamination or illegal dumping. Although no definitive explanation emerged, incidents like this powerfully reinforce the idea that wild animals living in uncontrolled environments might be absorbing unknown toxins. Until there's a reliable, scalable method to standardize wild boar meat quality, ensuring consistent taste, tenderness, appearance, and safety, wild hogs will likely remain primarily a pest species rather than a regular part of the American diet. The meat quality lottery is just too risky for most consumers and businesses. And even when meat does manage to get through legal processing, even when it passes inspection, even when someone is willing to sell it, there's still another layer of problems. Problems that happen right at the processing facility itself. The processing nightmare. Let's say somehow a wild hog makes it to one of those rare, certified processing facilities. The animal was captured live, transported legally, and is about to be inspected and slaughtered. Surely at this point the meat enters the food supply, right? Wrong. This is where some of the biggest problems actually show up. Unlike domestic pigs raised in pristine, controlled environments, wild hogs arrive from completely unpredictable conditions. And that unpredictability follows them right onto the inspection table. One of the biggest challenges is the shocking condemnation rate, meaning a huge percentage of carcasses simply don't pass federal inspection. From 2017 to 2019, facilities processed 242,198 feral swine. Sounds successful, right? Except a significant portion, we're talking thousands upon thousands, were rejected as unfit for human consumption. Carcasses are commonly condemned due to pneumonia, lung infections, abscesses or pyemia, pus-filled infections, contamination or peritonitis, infected internal cavities, and so much more. This pattern proves that unlike farm-raised pigs with predictable health profiles, wild hogs arrive with wildly unpredictable conditions, and many are simply unsuitable for consumption. Even carcasses that do pass inspection face another massive problem: extreme inconsistency. Wild hog meat lacks the uniformity that makes commercial pork easy to process and market. Domestic pork is consistent, same color, same fat content, Same tenderness, same flavor profile. Predictable. Wild boar meat fluctuates dramatically, from dark to very dark, from lean to extremely lean, from tender to noticeably tougher than expected, from mild-flavored to gamey or strong. This unpredictability creates massive problems for commercial operations. Large-scale processors and distributors avoid products with unstable quality, especially when rejection rates at slaughter are high. When every animal comes from a different environment with different diet, activity levels, and health status, quality control becomes nearly impossible. This unpredictability translates directly into financial risk that most businesses simply won't accept. Imagine running a restaurant chain. You need 1,000 pounds of pork per week with consistent flavor, texture, and appearance. Domestic pork delivers that perfectly. Wild boar? 1 week's shipment might be excellent. The next might be tough, dark, and gamey. Customer complaints skyrocket. You can't build a reliable menu around an unreliable product. Another critical factor. American consumers have very specific expectations for pork. They expect mild-flavored, juicy, tender meat with visible marbling. That's what decades of industrial pork production has trained them to desire. Wild hog meat is often darker, leaner, and tougher, traits that might appeal to game meat enthusiasts, but not to the general U.S. market accustomed to supermarket pork. Even when wild boar meat is safe and nutritionally comparable, it doesn't consistently match what consumers expect. That makes large-scale marketing nearly impossible. The global perspective. Here's where this story gets really interesting, and honestly, a bit embarrassing for America. Wild boar is widely eaten in many countries around the world, and I don't mean occasionally or reluctantly. In several regions, it's considered a traditional delicacy with centuries of culinary history. While Americans see wild hogs as pests or dangerous invaders, people in Europe, Asia, and parts of Oceania treat boar meat as a valued ingredient tied to culture, heritage, and local identity. Take Italy, for example. In Tuscany and Umbria, wild boar, known as cinghiale, is absolutely central to local cuisine. It appears in slow-cooked meat sauces for pasta, red wine stews called cinghiale in umido, rustic roasts, and even cured meats like wild boar salami. Italian hunting culture stretches back hundreds of years. The boar has long been seen as noble game rather than a nuisance. Families pass down recipes through generations, and autumn hunting season is celebrated like a regional holiday. Entire festivals are dedicated to wild boar. People travel from across Europe to attend these celebrations. France treats wild boar with similar reverence. The meat is often served in high-end restaurants, especially during hunting season. Traditional dishes like sanglier à la chasseur, hunter-style boar stew, remain wildly popular in countryside regions. Even in modern French cuisine, boar retains cultural prestige that elevates it above everyday meats. It's associated with tradition, skill, and refined taste. Germany also has a deep wild boar tradition. In many rural regions, boar appears in roasts, sausages, and hearty winter meals. Hunting is highly regulated and deeply respected, so consumers trust the quality of wild game completely. This trust, combined with centuries-old food customs, keeps boar meat firmly established in German kitchens and butcher shops. Which brings us to the ultimate question that you're probably asking right now. Will Americans ever accept wild boar on their plates? The future. Will attitudes change? So after everything we've discussed, the diseases, the regulations, the processing nightmares, the cultural stigma, the meat quality issues, is there any hope that Americans will eventually embrace wild boar? The answer is, it's possible. But several major things would need to change. First, there would have to be a fundamental shift in perception. Instead of seeing wild hogs as monsters tearing up farmland and spreading disease, people would need to see them as a free-range, naturally fed source of sustainable protein. Some small businesses and high-end restaurants are already promoting wild boar as an eco-friendly alternative to industrial pork. They're marketing it as antibiotic-free, hormone-free, truly free-range, environmentally beneficial, removing invasive species, supporting local hunters and farmers. If this message spreads through social media, food documentaries, and celebrity chef endorsements, it could gradually reshape attitudes over time. Second, the infrastructure would absolutely have to improve dramatically. Right now, the unpredictability of wild hog meat, in flavor, safety, and quality, makes large-scale commercialization nearly impossible. Without consistent supply and reliable processing systems, it's extremely difficult to normalize the product for everyday consumers. Third, environmental and economic pressures might eventually force change. As wild hog populations continue to grow, causing billions of dollars in agricultural damage each year, policymakers and consumers may eventually recognize the value in turning a costly pest into a profitable resource. The math is compelling. $2.5 billion in annual damage, millions of pounds of potential meat going to waste, growing consumer interest in sustainable, ethical protein sources, and climate change making conventional meat production more expensive. When the economic incentives align, change can happen surprisingly fast. If wild boar meat were successfully marketed as sustainable, reduces invasive species, ethical, free-range, natural life, healthy, lean, high-protein, omega-3 rich, adventurous, exotic, gourmet, unique, patriotic, solving an American environmental crisis, it could slowly make its way into mainstream American diets. So let's bring this all together. We started with a simple question. Why don't Americans eat wild boar when millions of these animals are causing billions in damage and providing a seemingly endless supply of free meat? Now you understand the answer isn't simple at all. The cruel irony is that the rest of the world figured this out centuries ago. In Italy, France, Germany, Japan, Korea, and dozens of other countries, wild boar is celebrated as delicious, sustainable, traditional food. Meanwhile, America faces an invasive species crisis, spends billions trying to control populations, wastes millions of pounds of potential meat, and still won't eat them. We've created a bizarre paradox. Too dangerous to eat freely, but too abundant to ignore. Too diseased to commercialize, but too destructive to leave alone. Too stigmatized to accept, but too numerous to control. And so the pigs keep multiplying, the damage keeps mounting, and the meat keeps going to waste. Will your children or grandchildren eat wild boar burgers? Maybe. Will wild boar bacon become as common as conventional bacon? Probably not in our lifetimes. But stranger things have happened in food culture. Lobster was once considered trash food for prisoners. Sushi was once considered dangerously exotic. Kale was pig food. Food culture changes, sometimes slowly, sometimes surprisingly fast. For now, wild boars will continue roaming across America, tearing up land, devouring crops, multiplying exponentially. And Americans will continue hunting them, trapping them, shooting them from helicopters, spending billions trying to control them. But eating them? That remains one of the most fascinating and bizarre taboos in American food culture. Now, I want to hear from you. After everything you've learned today, would you eat wild boar meat if it were properly inspected, safely prepared, and served in a restaurant? Or does the stigma run too deep? Would you try wild boar bacon, wild boar sausage, wild boar barbecue? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. Are you team absolutely not, that's disgusting, or team let's turn these pests into dinner? And if this deep dive into one of America's strangest food paradoxes fascinated you, if you learned something that completely changed your perspective, hit that like button and smash subscribe. We explore bizarre, complex, and often shocking stories that challenge what you think you know about the world. This wild boar invasion is just the beginning. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and maybe, just maybe, Stay open to trying something unexpected. The pigs are out there, millions of them, waiting. The question is, will America ever be ready to face them across a dinner plate instead of across a battlefield? Only time will tell.